Everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. Before we get into today's rock star guest, I just want to draw attention to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. A lot of things going on there today. I'll be on episode of my podcast 246. That means that I've done a lot of these things, and every time they inspire me. So I'd appreciate the love of going into Apple and hitting ratings and review. It helps with the popularity amongst those millions of shows that are out there. That's number one. Number two, you can continue to watch my film, Searching for the Summit, the NFL did on my epic journey up Mount Everest last year. It's actually up for 2 Emmys, Best Picture and Best Cinematography. So we'll see how that all plays out mid-May. So we'll see how that all goes. And the final things, as you can see with my hat, or you can listen to it, a Higher Ground, great organization here in Sun Valley, Idaho, all about empowerment of other people, continue to raise money towards that great organization. So it's all there. 100% of that money goes directly to Higher Ground if you go through my website to donate. So appreciate all the support. And on that note, let's get into today's great guest, another awesome NFL football player from the past. He's going on and doing some really cool things now. His name is Rick Mirer. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Well, listen, man, as I said, kind of in the opening of this whole thing, I've been chasing you around the block for a bit. And the reason why that is because you're a busy guy. And before we get into what you're doing today, which is really cool, it's just really amazing, actually, between you and Drew Bledsoe. I've also been chasing him a bit, but in terms of the wine business, we'll get into that in a minute. But as I was looking at your background, I mean, of course, I've known who you are in a long time. We have a common buddy, Steve Berline, another quarterback, great quarterback at Notre Dame. You carried on that tradition and set all kinds of different records. But I grew up in the great state of Washington. You played with the Seahawks. You were drafted, this number 2 guy, actually, overall in the 1993 draft. And so, obviously, I always have an eye on the Seattle scene, even though I don't live there anymore. But what was it like for you to grow up in the great state of Indiana? It just seems like it's such a basketball-minded and sports-crazed, state. I was wondering, I've never talked to somebody who grew up in that state. And what was that like?
It's an interesting question. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't know any different,
Yeah.
So it just seemed like, and this is obviously in the 80s, 70s and 80s, there wasn't internet and all the distractions and stuff. So a lot of pickup games, a lot of small town stuff. Both my parents were teachers and my dad was a coach. So I was kind of a gym rat, hung around. All I wanted to do was play basketball or baseball or football, whatever season it was in. So it felt normal to me. Now I come back and it seems very small and kind of slower than some of the other places I've lived, but I miss that and I kind of love that. And it's just a good place for a kid to kind of get to figure out his craft and play a lot of honest ball and see where it takes you.
Yeah, your background sounds very similar. Both my parents were also school teachers. I grew up basically on a play field with a ball in my hand and doing all that, probably the sport that most aligned with what I ultimately continue to do is football. I was good in those other sports too, but not like football in the way. You were a quarterback. I was mostly a wide receiver or running back, the guy that runs around all over the place.
Yeah.
Growing up, but it's just great times like that. And like you said, it's a different culture today, as you know. It sounds like you've got a couple kids that all play sports, are very active. And like you said, there's the internet and social media and all these other things. And so it's just not like it was, back in the day where you really had to use your mind, the creativity to go out and, 5 guys would show up in the park and there were 6 and you'd figure out a way to split them up and play flag football or whatever. On the park. I'm sure it was the same way for you growing up there.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't distracted by worried about the draft and things like we were just teenagers, just young kids, even younger. But we just, you see who shows up, you riding bikes around, whatever you do to try to gather at the right spots. It wasn't all that coordinated, but it worked out and it was a lot different. And the young kids hate hearing us tell them that, but I mean, it's just a totally different way of doing it. And I'm happy I'm from that.
Yeah. So obviously you were prolific in the great state of Indiana, and I'm sure you had offers all over the country. Was Notre Dame always the draw for you? Was that the kind of the magical, place that you wanted to be?
Everybody asked me that and everybody assumes that. I didn't grow up Catholic, so that's that. I mean, that's half the guys, it feels like. So I basically was surrounded by all these other Big Ten schools, and that's sort of what I watched. There's more of them than Notre Dame. It just so happened that in 1988, when Notre Dame's winning a national championship, I'm a senior in high school, 30 miles away. So the timing was just right. I don't know if I wind up in South Bend, if it's a different, 5 years before or after, I don't know. But I did take, trips to UCLA and Florida State and Stanford, talked to a lot of different places that were away from Indiana. But it just happened to be the year that all the right guys were coming back. The right coach was coming back with a, championship mentality, and expectations were very high. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I was a similar way growing up in Seattle, so everybody expected me to go to the University of Washington because I was on the trajectory, the same type of deal, and it was a great situation for me back in the day. But like you said, you've got so many great universities: Ohio State, Michigan, Northwestern, just up the street, probably 100 miles away, to get up to Chicago and play up there, and so certainly trying to figure it out. But I mean, there's no question that Notre Dame, some of the shine has come off a little bit, but I think back in your heyday, it was still, fairly prestigious to be able to actually go there and play. And I've been in that stadium, and it's an incredible venue. It's probably one I've played or been in most venues around the country. And that's the one I regret never having been in, but not actually played in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was still on the rise when I showed up because Coach Holtz, had been there 4 years now, and national championship guys talk, Heisman talk, All-Americans, all that. And then the NBC deal happened, and now it's in everybody's living room on Saturday. That was pretty new, and that's evolved, but it's been constant all these years. So, yeah, it's a small town. I'm from local area. You don't feel how big it is when you're here and you grow up in it, but when you leave like I have, and you move around the country and all these other cities I've lived in, you still hear about it everywhere. So it does play big, and it's a place that everybody has to respect. I guess the stadium's awesome. I mean, it's a lot different than it used to be, but there's a lot of history either era, and it's just a special place. And it's continued to get better and fancier and nicer for these young guys that are students. I like the old version, and it was just cool to have that history.
So when you're there, of course, it was kind of, in one sense, it was kind of, it wasn't parallel careers, but Joe Montana had been there. I know there's always been this association with you and Joe, because you guys both played, you're both quarterbacks, you're both were very, very talented. And now you're getting set to go into the NFL. And I mean, my gosh, I was a 7th round draft pick. So I'm saying this with tremendous amount of respect. I was able to hang around for 5 years. You played 12, something like that. And you're the number 2 guy overall. And when you're the number 2, you could also be the number 1 guy. And that's just where what was it like to be thought of in that vein, to be quartered in that vein? There's all that attention going in there. Everybody's talking about you and Drew Bledsoe. Drew ultimately gets drafted by the Patriots. You go to the Seahawks. I mean, what was that like to be in that moment? Because I've been in the combine. I've done all the same stuff that you, but it's a different deal. It's a different volume when you're talking about 7th round versus the number 2 pick in the draft.
I don't think you really notice. I only know it that way. I got a lot of attention with the recruiting stuff, and then all through college, all those, media days and press conference things. I mean, it just kind of goes with the territory. So the lead up to draft was nothing like it is. It's nothing like the circus it is now, but it was still, do you want to go to New York? And it's sort of a big TV thing. I chose not to because I just felt more comfortable being home. But Drew and I knew we were 1 and 2. Both teams revealed that. So we didn't know which order until it happened. And we've been great friends all this time and have a lot in common and could kind of rely on each other. We met through that process leading up to the draft. But his dad coached ball and his parents from small towns, so we had so much in common. We could kind of lean on each other, and we just had to wait and see how it played out.
I don't know whose town's smaller. I mean, again, being from the state of Washington and Walla Walla, where he grew up, now he has a vineyard over there, double back wines. It's pretty amazing. But I mean, it's pretty incredible just because, as you can imagine, growing up in a town, and I don't know that maybe Seattle obviously is bigger than, one of your bigger towns in Indiana, but at the end of the day, where he grew up, Walla Walla, is a teeny tiny town. I'm sure you've been up there, but there's
Yeah.
not much. There's Willamette, the little university there with 1,200 kids or something, and to have any kind of level of football, especially now where you have that guy just like slinging it all over. I'm sure it was the same for you, where you're kind of a big fish in a small pond, just kicking ass.
Well, I fortunately my parents kept us humble, and we didn't really make too big a deal of it. We just had to kind of take it in stride, and there was a lot of responsibility that went with being picked high, and the team kind of needing you to come in and play right away. And Drew and I went through the same thing, but I felt prepared to handle the media stuff. Wasn't overwhelming. Travel wasn't overwhelming. My at the time fiance, who's been my wife all these years, 28 years, that was stable. So I've been blessed and really lucky in most ways. Not every season was easy. Not every week or game or whatever was the best outcome, but that's life in the fast lane. And that's kind of what goes with it. And it doesn't matter what pick you are, you're going to get your head kicked in once in a while, and you're going to have some glory once in a while. So it was fun to never know what was coming, but kind of endured 12 years of it, and met a lot of people along the way, and played for some great coaches and ton of great teammates and buddies for life, really, teammates that I've stayed in touch with. And it's just, I wouldn't want to do it any other way. I mean, we went in with an honest approach, and you just got to let it play out and see what happens.
Yeah, there's one thing I've always talked about. It's hard enough just to get there. It's a whole nother level to stay there, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the magic. And you do have to be mindful of other people and grateful and all those things that it sounds like you came to the table with. Since you and I both played in the league, I'm not here to talk about the NFL. Let's go back and like relive your football moments. We both had those, and that's been great. But I think what's really amazing to me is really showing the path going forward. And so when you started to go to life after football, when did you start thinking about that? Because I really want to focus on that now. You're in the wine business. We're going to talk about that. But was it because you were in Southern or Northern California and you had easy access to Napa where you first started to kind of germinate this whole idea, or how did that all play out?
I mean, the interest started then, yes, for sure. I mean, I late 20s, early 30s, I went to the Niners for a couple of years, Raiders for the next two, and had training camp right in Napa. So I was around that business, or just the consumption part of that, and food and wine. That was not, I wasn't getting ahead of myself then, thinking, hey, I want to do this later. That just sort of happened after I was done and home, and starting a family and being dad and doing all that. It just kind of fell in my lap, I suppose. I studied marketing in school. This felt like basically a giant marketing exercise, tap into our own network, kind of ran by common sense. And mostly I had some flexibility. I was retired, yeah, but I'm 30 something and I'm not done. I had to find something else. So I was patient, found what I was, interested in and passionate about. It didn't really have to feed the family. I don't want to spin my wheels, but it was like, I can take a shot here. And here we are almost 14 years later, and it's growing and getting better every day. So I've learned a lot. It doesn't always, you're the victim of circumstances in the wine business too. We can't control Mother Nature and pandemics. Restaurant closures, a lot of different things that no one expected. But I guess having been through some adversity in the past prepared me a little bit. But we're learning as we go along. And it wasn't an obvious thing that if you met me at 30 years old, you wouldn't have thought probably this was going to be where I'm at with wine. But it just kept growing and developing, and it's been fun to share it.
So I'm asking this question because I just don't know the answer, and I should know the answer, but I don't. And that is, when I was over in Walla Walla again, going back to Drew, you could go out and you could physically see this beautiful chunk of property with his structure on it and double back and all that kind of stuff. You're in Napa. So do you have that same type of setup where, or are you just bottling, or how does that all work?
We're a custom crush facility. The difference between, and no knock on Washington or Walla Walla or Oregon, it's a little more expensive in Napa to do that.
Of course. Yeah.
And so there were limits and I understand how hard the business is. So, 50 or 100 acres somewhere just isn't reasonable in Napa. And so we don't make a lot of wine. We do not farm it. We have contracts with the growers. I've got a great winemaker, great team. We have some weather issues here and there, and that's just part of it. But you work through that, and at harvest, you get your tonnage, and you start making wine. And the goal is to sell through every cycle, and it starts over. The reds are delayed a little bit because of the aging process, but we started with just one wine, and now we're making 5 different things. Probably going to have 6 eventually. So it's growing. It's just not the big facility and all the dirt that people sort of imagine that every winery is, because the small producers just don't require that. It's just inefficient to own and operate something that you only need a few days a year for, in some cases, machinery and tanks and stuff for, it's a complicated thing. So it's good to be small. I like the small producers anyway. I think it's cool when you find things that aren't everywhere. Anybody can get the one that's on every single store shelf, but we pick and choose where we're going to pop up, and it's fun to have people even all this time later saying, I've never heard of you guys. Like, what is this? What is this new? I'm like, it's new to you. I mean, it's still newish, but it's been around, and it's just small. That's kind of on purpose.
Yeah. So another Washington quarterback, Damie Heward, paired up with Dan Marino. You probably know their wines, and then you've got something going on, and of course, Drew. And I don't know if it's a quarterback thing, but certainly it sounds like a smart thing in the way that you went about it in terms of really understanding your cost structure. You're not going cuckoo on buying all this property. It makes total sense when you. I lived in California half my life. I've also lived in Washington half my life, and there is a major, price difference when you're talking about, those two different places, especially Walla Walla compared to Napa. But one of the things that has been really cool, you've had all this attention on yourself. You're the quarterback, you're the leader of these different teams. Now you're a leader of a different kind of team in this wine business. And it sounds like, and I don't know much about it. I'm trying to understand more about it. The Mirer Family Foundation, you've given almost $1 million away, out there. So is that from proceeds of this 14, 15 years worth of work from your wines, some percentage that has gone towards this foundation?
That's probably half the time. I mean, we started the foundation back, I think it was 96. I graduated. We supported the endowment. We have a scholarship at Notre Dame to help kids that are not athletes in the kind of the part of the state I'm from. And it's cool to interact with them all this time and get a note, a thank you. Usually it's the same type of thing. Like that made their opportunity possible. Like their family couldn't afford tuition the way, straight away. So that's sort of the beginning. I've always had that give back kind of mentality. I was raised that way. And I think we volunteered a lot of time, and for boys and girls clubs to different schools and hospitals and all the things that all the teams that you've been on too, you kind of support the local stuff. It's just grown over time, because when we added the wine, we added a whole separate element to raise money. And we're not throwing big functions. I've never hosted a golf tournament. I've been to 1,000 of them, but we've been able to generate money from some trade-offs and some support with the wine. It starts adding up over time, and it's rewarding, and it's still quiet. We don't have a big staff of people. We don't really have any expense. It's just, we try to keep it clean. And that's of course we're going to get hit up for donations, because everybody needs wine for these events. But then there's plenty of instances where we've been able to raise money ourselves and say, selfishly, we need to do it too. And we're going to support, these 5 things. And that's been a big hit. We'd love to grow that. It takes time, but it's like the wine. It's only gotten better over time. And we're pretty proud of it. And I get to control that, and it's an impact that I feel. We actually get to talk to the people on the other end, and it just feels good.
That's awesome. I love that. I've done something similar here over the past 10 years. I got into mountain climbing, hardcore, climbing the 7 summits around the world, and then started using my climbing towards bringing awareness and money towards one with Chris Long. I'm sure you know who he is, or know Chris. Yeah, through with his waterboard.
Like,
what's that?
His dad tried to kill me back in the day, running around the field.
I've got a great story where when I was part of the first waterboard class, Chris and I and a group of other people had made it to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. It was my second time I'd been up there, and he and I sat underneath this big sign that essentially is declaring that you're on the top of the highest peak, in Africa. And I put my arm around him and say, Chris, there's not too many guys to say that they played with your dad, Howie, and actually climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And so I'm in an exclusive club when it comes to that, but thankfully I never got hit like I'm sure did.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that was the thing you were involved in. I've seen that over the years. It's pretty cool how that's affected a lot of people and helped a lot of people.
Well, I think, like a lot of things that you're talking about, chain reaction, one thing has led to another, to another, to another, and with that small town mindset, but with a big vision. And part of that big vision to me was about understanding what Chris was doing and saying, like, what can I do? What kind of impact can I have? Not just about giving the people, in Africa, but also at the time, my daughter, we're getting kind of on the other end of it, but she's last 15, 16 years, she's had epilepsy. And so part of that, I got involved with Higher Ground, and through that, we've raised all kinds of money. It's not $1 million, but just for that organization alone, almost 200 grand. And so, these different fundraisers, the film that the NFL did on my journey, and rather than turn that into a money-making event, is, for that and fill up seats in these different theaters, and 100% of that money go towards a Higher Ground to help these different people overcome whatever adversity that they're going through. And as we're getting older, and I'm just a little bit older than you, Rick, but at the end of the day, it's weird how the whole thing gets tipped upside down, because in the early days, it's really about just us and when can I go out and play, and that's all it is. And then you go through and you get all your attention, and then at some tipping point, you're like, this is great, but what can I do for others? And that starts with the dedication to your wife, your commitment to your kids, what you're doing in the community, and then giving back to these kids. I mean, I can only imagine the impact that you've had on if you do the math and you divide $1 million by whatever, and you get X amount of, I don't know if it's 20 or 30 or what the number is, doesn't matter. But those individual kids that you were actually able to help, and now they can go help somebody hopefully down the road.
Yeah, I think that happens. And I think just trying to be a good example, but we're also doing something that's just necessary to make things happen. But it's an endless, journey with, there's so many things that need help and needs support. Some are gigantic organizations like these endowments and and the other ones, it's like the small town stuff where you see the immediate, you build a park, or, it's simple stuff like it's school supplies maybe, or it's a church, it's some sort of little program in the summer. So, I got a soft spot for all those things. We can't do everything, but we try to keep it, health and education for kids is the primary thing. There's other things that will pop up because you get the military stuff and different things. That mental health now is such a big thing. You hear so much about that. So we've evolved, we've been able to evolve, but our focus has always been the kids, because I had a good shot. I was healthy. I had a great family. Not every kid has two parents at home and a ride everywhere. So we've felt good about it. We're not going to stop. We got a long way to go, but it's kind of fun now to have a few different vehicles to reach more people and try to have some more stuff happen.
So you were able to play in all these different markets, throughout the country, including my great state of Washington. Do you find yourself in California these days because that's where you're making your wines, or where do you find yourself around the country?
Well, actually, so I did 4 years in Seattle, 93 to 96 seasons. Yeah. Then we bought a place in San Diego. We've been in Del Mar since 97. Our oldest was born in 98. And I'm like, man, it's a pretty good place to grow up. And we were literally looking for an off season, good, warm weather spot.
Yeah.
Had great friends, had a good workout group and everything. And fast forward, it's all these years later and we're still there. So, we travel a lot. Our boys are active, playing college sports, and, we're just trying to be able to be flexible enough to do that. But yeah, I'm 500 miles from Napa, but it's as Drew and I talked with Damon and Dan at the, 15 years ago about doing something collectively, all four of us, it became very clear to me that I need to do something in California because that's where I live. And their story is Washington. So instead of doing one project with 4 quarterbacks, we have, 3 separate things. And there's other guys too. John Elway's got a nice system, which is tied to his stuff at Stanford. So yeah, there's, a lot of quarterbacks kind of want to be in charge, I guess. But I think Damon and Drew and I get our hands dirty and are like in it every day. And I needed it to be kind of where I was from, not where they're from. And it's been awesome that way. And we've been in California longer than we ever would have thought, but it's been hard to leave.
Well, Del Mar is a pretty sweet spot. I left Manhattan Beach for Sun Valley, Idaho, so I know exactly where you are. I've driven through there many different times. I've got a bunch of buddies down in the greater San Diego area, but it's all good at the end of the day. And I think, again, going back and resetting this from kind of minute one of this podcast, which is I go to these different alumni events and there's a lot of guys still signing autographs and talking about what they did 30 years ago. And that's great for them. But I think there's a whole nother life, and that's just chapter 1. And if kind of forgot about chapter 35, right, or 65 or whatever number that you might be on. And so, I think one of the reasons why I want to have you on this pod is not because you were some former superstar football guy. I don't really care about that. What I care about is what you're doing today, which is helping people, and you have a purpose, you have a why, you have a passion for what you're doing, and you're really trying to make that thing grow. And that's, I think, what inspires others when they say this guy's got a trajectory and a history and an arc of success, because you've kind of done the copy and paste, I'm sure, of using those same things that made you successful in football to, pounding grapes and creating great wine.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of living through the not so perfect days and trying to do the best you can. And adversity, I guess, is something that some people can handle and some don't. And I've had fair share of it. And I just decided halfway through my career, I guess, in training camp, I said, I'm not going to complain anymore. Like, we can all bitch about it's too hot and the dorms are, the way we travel. And now I've told kids, including my own, you actually do miss the things that you complained about when you were doing it. The late on the plane and the bus rides and, the ice bag through the airport, whatever. Those are the camaraderie is what I miss the most. But the next is the stuff that not everybody else ever gets to see, and I don't know. I tend to try to do it myself. If, we have people that are helping all the stuff we're working on, but I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty either. And it's kind of, that goes all the way back to growing up in some small town in Indiana and doing all the chores around the property, because I didn't make my kids do that. And I hope they got enough of it to serve them later, but they're growing fast, and I've been able to be a part of everything they do, and just trying to set a good example the best we can. And we're not perfect, but we do what we can to help and try to keep it all in perspective.
Sounds like I mean, again, we haven't got into this at all, and we can just lightly dip into this, but you mentioned earlier that you've got, I think, 3 kids and they're all playing college sports somewhere. So it sounds like they were affected in the right way, which means you were the right kind of parents, both you and your wife, in terms of them not feeling the pressure to live up to all your success.
Yeah. And I didn't push anybody to do what I did. Like they all played football. The youngest is going to go play at Stanford next year. He's a senior in high school, but the other 2 play lacrosse in college. And so one's the oldest, Mo's reconnected me to Notre Dame. He's been, in South Bend for 5 years. Oliver's at Michigan and he's a junior. But that's an entirely new network, and it's fun to go kind of be around those parents and that campus. And, I'm wearing a Michigan hat. Never thought that would happen. Okay. You change roles. It's totally different. So, the pressure to try to be dad, that's never really been on them, other than, just they want to be productive and play and stuff. And they do. But for Charlie, the quarterback, well, I don't know. Well, he's got a great attitude about it. So I think it worked out with the right kid playing the right, that position. But it can get heavy. And I see tons of guys whose kids or, sons or daughters follow them. And of course, everybody knows who they are, and their last name. And that doesn't need to be a curse. It needs to be something that helps them. But they need to find their own identity too, their own path. And for my guys, it was a different sport, which I knew nothing about. So it was awesome. The parents in San Diego didn't even know the rules of lacrosse. So nobody's yelling at like yelling at umpires or yelling at referees. We're watching and we're just like trying to enjoy the action. So it's been fun. I get to live through them now. I turn the page. They probably don't even remember me playing. They've seen clips, but it's more about how great my wife's been supporting all four of us. Cause I'm just a bigger, older, tired guy. But they have teammates they're just like our teammates. I mean, they're younger, but it's just like going through it all again. And I love it. It's just so fun to see all these kids and meet all the parents and start over every cycle with a new class.
I can totally appreciate that. I've got one daughter who's at University of Arizona, and the other went to USC. And so not necessarily Arizona, but certainly USC was always a major rival. So it's kind of talking about Notre Dame, Michigan. For me, it was Washington, USC. Now I found myself as a USC parent, donating down there. So, all right. Well, listen, man. Hey, I appreciate you coming on and love your story. I really want to sample your wines. I'm going to go online or figure out how I can buy some stuff and slurp that down. I love red wine. So that's kind of my hankering, things I like to have. But, again, everybody that I've talked to about you have had nothing but just great things to say. And that's certainly a reflection of your friends, the company that you keep when they're, hold you in high esteem and, what you've stood for and the great mentor you've been, not just to other people, but your kids and the people in your community. So thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you finding me. It's good to connect. And I know we didn't play together, but it kind of feels like we did, and that's the brotherhood.
I was a receiver, man. I would have been your number one go-to guy.
Bread's buttered. I do.
All right. There he is. The one, the only Rick Mirer. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.